Hey, thanks for checking out this podcast. Our hope is that it's an encouragement to you, that it builds your faith, that it helps you be a better leader and a better influencer in and through your life. If this is helpful to you, we'd love you to subscribe and also share it with somebody else to encourage them too. Thanks.
All right.
Pastor Jeremy, how you doing?
Dan, good. I'm excited for us to dive into this topic today. But before we do that, how are you doing? Church just opened up.
I'm doing good. Yeah. I'm excited that right now it's March?
Yep.
And church has been online for quite a long time. So going into in-person services is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love it. This past Sunday gave me a lot of joy. I think there's a lot of fear that with a lot of people, more services, it's going to tire you out more.
Right.
And we had been used to doing less, physically, I guess,
Sure.
doing less services, being fully online. But more people in the room gave me more energy. So I feel really pumped, really blessed that I'm not tired, that things are actually giving me energy around here.
Yeah.
The idea of 3 services this Sunday just gets me pumped and doesn't scare me as much as it did the first time.
Yeah, you were pretty nervous that, wow, this is going to tire me out, because it's extra, right? It means
Absolutely.
more. But actually the extra is life-giving, because there's human beings in the room. They provide some of that energy.
Absolutely.
And that's fun. And you know, the truth is that there's a weird flip side to that. Knowing that there's people on the other side of the camera, hello camera, is life-giving as well, right? So, but not knowing, that's hard, right? Totally. So it's the people in the room, the people on the other side of the camera, but it's the fact that there's people there.
Absolutely. So this podcast is all about equipping, it's all about next steps. And today we're talking about first steps, like how to get started in your faith, right?
Right. Yeah, 3 kind of starting points for your faith. So, because here's the deal, the Christian life is a journey, right? So following Jesus is just that, following Jesus. He's moving, you're moving. There's not a sort of arrival point or a finish line. It's like from the day you start, there is a starting point, but then from that starting point, you keep going until you get to heaven.
Yeah, and your walk with Jesus is it's kind of like a marriage in the sense that the wedding day is this big event. There are all these things attached to it, and there's vows, right? And those vows are way more important as your marriage goes on. You don't learn your vows just to recite them on your wedding day. You learn your vows so that you can live them out. And so these 3 things that we're about to talk about are relevant to everybody. They're not just relevant to people who are just starting out.
Right. So when we say starting point, we're going to give you 3 things, 3 starting points for your faith. But actually those points are things that are for every day of the Christian life, right? They're starting point things, but then they're things that you live day after day after day. So the illustration you were using there, your vows and your wedding, you've got these vows you declare on your wedding day. That's your starting point. But those vows are actually more, more important or more existent on your daily life in your marriage.
Absolutely. So do you want to start us off with number 1?
Yeah, sure. So number 1, we call it from knowledge to knowing. Knowledge to knowing. It's more important to know Jesus than to know about Jesus.
Absolutely. And I think that this point's so important because I think we can get caught up in doing all of the right things, going through all the right programs, listening to enough podcasts, gaining all this knowledge to the point where okay, we've arrived, we're on the good track, everything. And the hard part is that you can know all these things about Jesus and completely miss knowing Jesus.
Exactly.
I like to relate it to, I look up this guy named James Smith on Facebook, the most common name in America. I look him up and I learn all these cool facts about him. I learn about his grandkids, learn about what he likes to do during the day. I learned that he went on a trip to Paris in 2007. I'm going through and I learn all these things about him. And the real question is, do I know James Smith?
Right.
No, I just know a lot of things about him. Right. And so I think it's an important shift going from looking at all the things about Jesus and then putting yourself in a position to know Jesus.
Right. So Christianity at its core, following Jesus, is not so much a subject to be studied as it is a person to be known.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're following Jesus. We're following a person. We're not like signing up for a class or a course. And I think the big challenge for us is that a lot of the disciplines it takes to follow Christ and to be a Christian and to grow as a Christian include learning. So, you go to church, you listen to a sermon, you sing songs, you go to a small group, you discuss questions, you watch a video or a class and all these things. And they're all sort of improving our knowledge, but they're not necessarily crossing over into real Christianity, which is causing us to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Knowledge is important, but knowing is vital.
Right. And the knowledge has to lead to that knowing, or it's just information and not actually going to help me, which is true kind of in every area of life. Like, honestly, you can learn about running a marathon, and you can know all about it, and it's a totally different thing than running a marathon.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I think sometimes for me, the way I like to differentiate that is, has my Christianity become experiential? Or maybe another word for it is personal. So knowing Jesus is about personally experiencing God and on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good starting point.
Totally.
Actually, can we just tie in, maybe you can say a few words about how does that relate to this idea of unveiling our eyes?
So I think that something that's really important is that when it comes to knowing Jesus, there's a shift that happens where suddenly we see with new eyes.
Okay.
Suddenly things start clicking. I went to Sunday school my whole life, and my parents and my grandparents told me all these stories about Jesus, and I kind of knew it.
Yeah.
But there's something that clicks when suddenly it's like the veil is pulled back from our eyes and we can see rightly what it is. And it's a real God meeting you there. That
we need that to happen. Absolutely. Somehow, some way, there has to be a moment in time or a series of moments in time. And it's actually like we're saying with all of these this is ongoing. But there has to be an actual unveiling. There has to be a moment where it clicks. There has to be this. And you almost can't force that, right? You could have two people sitting in the same church service or in the same experience, and one of them it works for. It clicks. The Holy Spirit, what we call, unveils their eyes. Yeah. So that's one of the things we're praying for in a starting point of Christianity, is we're praying for that unveiling. We're praying for that supernatural moment of faith where God enables a person to see, to get it.
And I love what it says in Ephesians 1, chapter 18. It says, I pray that your hearts be flooded with light so that you can understand the confident hope he has given to those he called, his holy people who are his rich and glorious inheritance. The ESV says, having the eyes of your heart enlightened. And I think the great part is that he's praying for something we can't do for ourselves.
Right.
It's a sense by which you've got to put yourself in a position to meet with God so that he can unveil your eyes.
Get that to happen. So that's a great prayer, right? Lord, let the eyes of my heart be enlightened, or unveil my eyes. And that's a great prayer to pray for ourselves. It's a great prayer to pray for others. And it's the starting point of following Jesus, because you have to come to this point where you're like, Jesus is real. He's a real person. I can know him. And then it's the continuing piece. Okay, should we go on to the second thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it is, what is it? Counting the cost.
Yeah, the cost of following Jesus is everything.
Right.
And I think when it comes to this, sometimes we don't quite measure the cost. We don't quite measure all it's going to cost us. And maybe we did. When we first started out, maybe we understood and realized that the cost of following Jesus is leaving behind my good, my bad, my everything for the sake of laying hold of Jesus, and leaving my boats and my nets behind to go after on this big adventure. I think we forget, and sometimes we revert back to being hyper selfish.
Sure.
And I think that's the reason this is so important to hold on to as you go, is to realign yourself with the fact that it costs you everything. Right. It costed you everything to follow Jesus.
And it does every minute of every day. So the essence of following Jesus, the starting point of following Jesus is, hey, it's an all-in deal. This is all of me. I like the way I heard one guy say it one time. He said, I gave all that I knew of myself to all that I understood of Jesus, right? Or all that I knew of Jesus at that given time. So that's different on different days. Like, as I get to know myself better and as I grow in my journey, I have to do that again and again. But I think it's really important to emphasize and state, this is the Christian life. Like, there's no other kind of Christian life. It's a count the cost. Yeah. It demands everything of me, and there's no other path of Christianity, if you will.
Matthew 19 shows this guy going to Jesus, and he says, "Teacher, what do I have to do to have eternal life?" And Jesus tells him, "You have to sell everything and follow me."
Yeah.
Sell all that you have. This guy's rich. He says you have to follow all the rules and be willing to give up the most important thing in your life.
Yeah.
And then when you follow him, you'll get everything.
And Jesus didn't hide that.
No,
Or in fact, one of the first sermons I ever preached, in fact, the first sermon I ever preached to like a full church, like a real big church, was called The Call of Christ. And I just walked through the Gospels every time Jesus invited people to follow him. And almost every time he names the cost. He names that it's, if you want to follow me, take up your cross daily. Deny yourself. He doesn't put the cost in the fine print at the bottom, like a bad salesman. Yeah, he just puts it right up front. So that's a good starting point for the Christian life. It's like, okay, I realize this is all of me. This is my whole life. It's an all-in deal. Yep.
Every day.
Every day. And that's not meant to be condemning or beating you up. It's just like, remind yourself of that. That's a starting point of the Christian life. That's part of what it means to follow Jesus. Absolutely. So from knowledge to knowing, that's realizing it's real, unveiling the eyes, letting this be reality. Then counting the cost. And then the third one?
From rags to riches, so to speak.
Right.
Enjoying the rewards.
Sure.
Laying hold of the joy that giving everything up gives you.
Yeah, we better state that because we're just talking about counting the cost, and sometimes that feels like a heavy, and there's definitely going to be moments in our lives where we're like, I don't want to pay the price. I don't want to count the cost. So this is what's going to help us get there, right?
Absolutely. It's what we get in return.
Right.
I think one hurdle for people sometimes is we get from 1 and 2. We get from like knowing Jesus, spending time with him, and then we get to the part where we're counting the cost and the sacrifice, and we do that. And then we do that, and then we do that. And then we do that, we give up, we sacrifice. And a lot of the times people are leaving on the table good things that they could be having. Right. And they get into this mindset that it's all self-denial. Yeah. It is, but it's also accepting good gifts from God. And there's a lot of good gifts to be had from God for those who follow him.
And they're infinitely more than what you had to give up. Yeah. So there is lots to count the cost. But then there's this amazing reward that goes with it that's insanely bigger than any cost you could ever pay. I mean, I think of the exchange as all of me for all of God. And the comparison is not even close. So following Jesus has huge rewards, and you have to embrace that and walk in that every single day. So those are our 3 starting points. Yep. Yeah. And they're present continual. So you start with those things. Know Jesus for real. Count the cost for real, right? Make that real. And then enjoy the rewards right off the bat. You have to know the exchange that you're making. And then you want to do that every single day. Yeah. Sweet.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoy these, and I'm excited for the future and the next few podcasts we do.
Yeah, and hopefully these will help people, all of us, you and me, and people take just always the next step. What's the next step on my faith journey? Yeah. And I think these 3 starting points we talked about today are fantastic ones for that.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone have a great week.